Hi, so my name is Mike Bergeron. I'm going to talk about near live production. And what is near live production? Somebody asked me a minute ago. It's the idea with near live is you're getting the atmosphere of a live production and really the crew of a live production, but you're using more of a scripted post-production path. So when you're doing post-process content or scripted content, it's a controlled environment. The controlled lighting, you set everything up ahead of time. There's rehearsals maybe, and you really are seeking perfection in the images that you gather. Now, in a live production for sports or concerts or things like that, it's happening in the moment, and on the one hand, you may have to make some compromises to get that out in time to maintain the live production. But on the other hand, it has the excitement and the feel of a live audience usually, and really that essential time element of something that's happening right in front of you. There's programming right now that may appear to be live programming, but it was actually completely post-produced. And part of the reason for that is it's may just be practical to do it that way, but also if you're creating some content that's going to be HLG or HDR content, 4K content that you will deliver over the top with a download rather than a broadcast, which may not be possible for you, you would shoot it as if it was live, but then post-produce it as if it were scripted, and then you can get the HLG, you can get the HDR, 4K, any of those things following a normal production path. One thing about HDR, for live production, most of the HDR is tending towards hybrid log gamma, which is really made for live production and for something that you can see immediately how it looks. Where a lot of the scripted production for package delivery, like movies, is using perceptually quantized PQ. I mean, PQ10, PQ10 plus. These are the things that are delivering on Blu-ray or delivered content. So the way you don't shoot in perceptually quantized. You would, to produce that content, you would probably shoot in a raw format like log, like a log format, or vlog like in a Vericam, for example. So for HDR, and speaking about HDR in particular, come on. Uh-oh. Oh, there they go. So for HDR, we're able to get a lot more contrast, and also a lot more color gamut, and we increase our overall color volume. And you can see over there in some of the sets some HDR content to really see what the impact of that is and how exciting that is. And most people agree that having more contrast and more color is more impactful than having more resolution. So there are those that are seeking to shoot in HD resolution at HDR because it looks so good and it's so easy for the customer to see the difference. But when we are going into HDR, I keep doing this. Come on. Oh, there it is. All right. Everything that was Rec 709, it was a standard from the monitors to the cameras to the entire production path, and it's been known for years now. When we go to HDR, there are different ways we can deliver HDR. There are different ways we can capture HDR, so we have to manage that path in between. So it's important to know that how your content was produced. If it's live, you need to know that you're producing in the same contrast characteristic that you're gonna show on the screen. When it's post-produced, it's a controlled environment. It's easier to get that right. But when you're live, you have to keep careful track from the beginning. You sure it's over there? It's like my hotel remote. All right, okay. All right, so the perceptually quantized PQ, and what perceptually quantized is everything that you're capturing, the digital level, the digital luminance level of every pixel, is referenced to what the brightness level on the final viewing screen will be. So that's the perception of the screen. So there's a reference screen where we know that this code level at the capture or in post is going to correspond to a particular brightness level in nits at the screen. So we need to know, this works very well in Hollywood post-production because the screen is in a very controlled environment. You know what that luminance level is going to be. You have control over it. I get the hang of this. Now, hybrid log gamma works very much like regular standard 709 gamma that's been around for a while now, and that is set up to the acquisition device and to a generic display. So what the code values correspond to are from the bottom to the top, and that gets scaled to whatever the monitor can do. So whatever is the darkest that you produce will be the darkest level on the monitor, and the brightest you can produce is the clip level of the monitor. So the brighter your monitor, the more contrasty your monitor, the more that will get spread out over that, as opposed to perceptually quantized, where if you exceed the monitor, it's just going to clip. So in live, that's very useful because I can also scale that to the capability of the camera so that the lowest of the camera and the brightest of the camera will fit in that same range. That's going to be the lowest and the brightest of the monitor. Also, if in a live environment I need to do something like affect the knee or make some change as we go based on looking at the results, I can do that. I can do that because this is a characteristic. It's a system that's meant to be watched as you go, as opposed to going through a post process. I think I have to just be more confident. All right, so to produce live HDR, we put some additional features into our studio cameras, because one of the things that you're going to need is for live, like I was saying with hybrid log gamma, you need to be able to adjust that HDR output. A cinema camera is going to capture in a raw format and leave everything to post because there are other professional people who are going to handle that. But in live production, that's left to the crew in the van who's setting that up based on a QC monitor. They're also going to need to be working in a hybrid environment because when you're doing HDR live, there's still going to be a lot of standard dynamic range that you're going to see on the viewfinder monitors or in reference monitors or monitors that the sound guy looks at. So you need to have them both at the same time. And of course, the viewfinder is not going to be HDR. Nobody's making an HDR viewfinder. It does not help you focus. So one of the reasons why I need to be able to adjust the SDR independently is how bright things are depends a lot on where they are. Make sure I got that. So now those match. Before they didn't. So if I have it's like if I have a TV outdoors, I'm going to need to turn the brightness up. Actually, if you look at the TV screen on the you can't see it from here, but from the 4000, the UC4000 over there, we've got the brightness turned up because that monitor is way up in the air in full lighting. But if you're in the dark, like the HDR monitors over there, we'll turn the brightness down. So that's fine. But when I'm in HDR, I can that bright area that looks brighter or darker depending on the background can be different parts of the frame. So if I have my subject is set to a reasonably engineering sensible luminance level, they'll look fine. But if the background is much brighter, it's going to make them look dark. I'm going to have to open the iris up. And that's fine in HDR because the HDR has such a contrast capability that I can do that. It still looks great. But when I do that in SDR, the SDR picture blows out. So I need to have if I'm doing live hybrid environment, I need to have a way to adjust that SDR picture. Hold it down. Here we go. And so what we can do with all the studio cameras that are supporting HDR, when they're doing hybrid log gamma, I set my HDR picture to where I want it to be, and then I go and I separately adjust the SDR to tone it down so that still looks good. Because I don't want my viewfinder blowing out. That's not helping anybody. Now, the other bit I talked about was that you also might use a knee or something like that in a live environment where you wouldn't do that in a scripted environment because that'll be handled in post. So for near live, it's a different kind of a situation because while I am maybe producing a live signal that I might be streaming or even broadcasting, and that is going to most likely be in standard dynamic range. And then I will later post-produce some content in 4K HDR that'll be available over the top or for a download later. So I need to have still need to have my 709 SDR looking normal, but then my HDR content is handled by just recording everything ISO record from every camera in the same format that I would record in a cinema camera. So what I'll do is I'll treat that ISO record into media that is going to be as if I was using a camcorder, and that'll go through a normal post process while simultaneously I'll be looking at a pre-finished feed from each camera for the live cut product. So with the Panasonic studio cameras, they're very well suited to do this. The reason why we can produce the hybrid log gamma and the 709 output at the same time and be able to adjust them independently is because what the camera sends to the CCU is the raw imager output. So from the raw imager output, I derive everything, and that is really the best case scenario. When you're taking the raw imager output, I can get the best possible looking hybrid log gamma output, best possible looking 709 SD output, or I can take that raw image and I can convert it into a raw file. So when we add that raw file, we use the raw file output that we use. We of course used vlog, which is the raw file of the Varicam and of the EVA. And so that means that on the one, also, if I'm making a recording, the ISO record from the studio cameras, from the UC4000, will be the same raw format that you have on the record from the Varicam. Suppose I'm using both of them on the same production. And also and because of this, we took the UC4000, we got it tested by Netflix, and so that is joined the other cameras on the list of cameras that are now usable in a Netflix production. Now that's really important for the production because if I can get that vlog output, that means that if I'm doing a production with cinema cameras and now all of a sudden I need a really long lens, for me to get a 90 by lens for a Varicam, I'm going to have to find either a 90 by PL lens, and that's going to be a problem to find that, trust me. Or I'm going to have to put a B4 to PL adapter on it, and that's going to cause lens aberrations. Whereas if I can use the studio camera with a vlog output, I can record that. I can just go to any broadcast rental house, get a build-up sled and get a 90 by lens, and I'm good to go. And that's going to have rear controls. It's going to be very easy. Not only that, if I'm doing a concert shoot, it's going to be easy for me to hire a camera operator because all I got to do is hire the guy who shoots the baseball games on the weekends, and he knows how to run this camera. I don't have to find a rare specialist and fly him in from the coast. So this way, it's a more practical solution to get a very long lens in a situation when I'm doing a kind of a cinema shoot. Now, these are going to match because, first of all, because it's the vlog file, as I mentioned before. It's the same characteristic, it's the same format, it's the same lookup tables, but also the UC4000 happens to use the Panasonic cinema style imager in it, which it is resizing to work with the 2/3 inch glass. And that is really how we're getting good HDR out of that camera, and also good dynamic range and good 4K, and are still able to use those 2/3 inch lenses. So it really allows me to do an ISO record of a live production, doing a live production like I would before, and alternately, it allows me to use that in conjunction with cinema style cameras when I need a very long lens that's impossible to find for those style cameras. And I think that's it. If this advances, yes, it is. And so, and that's something that's just available. That Vlog output mode was just made available in the March software download for the UC4000 cinema camera, and we're hoping we'll see it involved on a lot of big projects this year. Thank you very much.